See You Now is a podcast highlighting the innovative and human-centered solutions that nurses are coming up with to solve for today's most challenging healthcare problems. Created in collaboration with Johnson & Johnson and the American Nurses Association and hosted by nurse economist and health tech specialist Shawna Butler.
This is See You Now. I'm Shawna Butler. When we think about and talk about innovation, we might picture technological advances, scientific breakthroughs, and exciting new devices. But the Latin origins of the term innovatus remind us that to innovate also means to renew and to restore. When it comes to childbirthing in the U.S., renewing a commitment to safety and security for everyone is an innovation that can help restore confidence in a nation that is swiftly becoming one of the scariest places to be pregnant and give birth. The U.S. currently has the highest maternal mortality rate out of all of the countries in the developed world. And since the year 2000, maternal mortality rates have seen a disturbingly steady increase. And the U.S. stands alone and stands out as the only developed country experiencing an increase. The focus on maternal and infant health in the U.S. is paramount, where, according to a March of Dimes report, over 5 million women are living in maternity care deserts with no nearby hospitals offering maternity care services. These are just a few reasons this episode with maternal care pioneer Ruth Lubic is so significant. As the saying goes, never let a good crisis go to waste. And in a career that has spanned over 6 decades, Ruth has taken every opportunity to do the big things that no one thought possible and made them possible. She has received numerous honors for her innovations and enduring dedication to better birth experiences and outcomes. We talk with Ruth about what she witnessed early in her career that shaped her drive to improve maternity care and serve families.
When women would go in to the hospital labor and delivery suite for birth, first of all, family was not included, so they were going in alone. Secondly, they were given Demerol and scopolamine in most instances. Thirdly, they would be tied into the labor bed because they'd had enough Demerol and scopolamine that they were not compos mentis.
In 1975, in New York City, Ruth set up the first legally sanctioned freestanding birth center in the U.S., a non-hospital setting where women could go to give birth. In 1993, Ruth was the first nurse to be named as a MacArthur Fellow and sought to help those suffering the most due to high infant mortality rates. She used her grant to found the D.C. Developing Family Centers. We caught up with her in Washington, D.C., where she and her husband Bill connected with us from the NPR studios. Okay, I just need to be very honest with you, Ruth. I'm hyperventilating, having fangirl phenomenon at the moment.
Oh, goodness.
Yes, it has been a hope to have an opportunity to talk with you, have a conversation with you. And I know that there are many people who express their appreciation and admiration, and I just want to add to that very loud choir and chorus.
Thank you, Shawna.
Yeah, I started my career in Washington, D.C., in the very places that you have chosen to serve. A lot of my training was spent in Anacostia and many of the neighborhoods at that point in time that were known as the crime capital of the world. Mm-hmm. And what I came to know was a group of wonderful families with strong and rich identities who were really struggling against a system that did not acknowledge them, did not support, did not serve them. And when I learned about your work up in New York and some degree of following your career, it was a little bit hard before the internet. But after the MacArthur fellowship, it became a lot easier. And it was one of my questions very early in my careers. If the MacArthur Foundation is looking for those who can make a more just and verdant world, they would certainly be awarding many more fellowships to nurses. So I was very excited to see that you open their minds to that.
I was the first one.
Exactly.
Yes, I was surprised. And the pen is collecting my papers and things, and they're going to be...
Yeah, I do. I saw that there's a nice collection of all of that. And I think what I'd love for you to share, because you have a unique depth and breadth of the changes and the challenges that have happened within maternal infant care. And I would love it if you could share your history, because when we think about so many of the changes and the improvements and the advancements and in some ways deteriorations of what it has been like to be pregnant and or pregnancy intention, that's a whole other part of this. And then where we go to get care, who is part of that care, where that care is delivered. There have been dramatic changes, and I would love to hear your sharing of that unfolding and changing and where some of those influences have been from.
Well, we opened the first birth center in 1975, and by the early 80s, there were midwives from all over the country coming to us saying that they wanted to do a birth center. They would come to look at us, and then they would decide that, yes, this was what was needed wherever they were. And they were from all over the country. And so we tried to help them take advantage of what we had learned, because part of it is getting the legal permission to do it. Part of it is the money, and so forth and so on. So that's what we worked on very hard, and formed and then set up the American Association of Birth Centers, and that's been doing workshops in how to establish freestanding birth centers for a number of years now, and they're very complete. They go into everything, from the space that you need, and the staff that you need, and the funding that you need, and so forth and so on. And when we opened, we were the first freestanding birth center in the country that was legally sanctioned, and because there had been people in the field who had tried to give a different kind of birth to families they were caring for, but it wasn't done in the same way that we were doing it. And so it continues to grow. And by continuing to grow, I mean we were the first legally sanctioned center in 1975, and now there are more than 350 birth centers operating in this country. There has been a study by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation called the Strong Start Study, which looked at birth center care, the maternity home care, and the centering pregnancy.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So those three things were looked at in the Strong Start study, and there have been materials come out of the federal government suggesting that that there should be more birth centers available, especially to very low-income families, that it does improve outcomes and so forth. Now,
speaking of the outcomes, I've heard you testify to many sessions of Congress and giving data that is so impressive as far as birth outcomes, safe births, and being able to do so at much lower costs. What is the difference? What is it that you're doing in the birth centers that is producing so much better outcomes at much better value?
Well, I think the thing that we do is consider the families to be part of our team.
Mm-hmm.
And they have their responsibilities, to learn about what's going on, and we make the information available to them. And when they come for sessions, for prenatal sessions, they're usually group sessions, and we just encourage them, and then they have a chance to talk to other families who have utilized the birth center and find out what they feel about their experience. And it's, if I wanted to stop it, I don't think I could do it.
That's you started a movement that you can't even stop. I'm thinking about what women in your generation, when they were giving birth, what their options were, but more when birthing became highly medicalized. Can you describe what that birth experience was like for the moms and for the families?
Well, it was not a family experience. It was a medical experience. But it was a way of taking the whole experience away from the family. And even when we did the first birth center on 92nd Street between Madison and Park in New York, which is a high-rent area. And the families who came to us there came easily, enjoyed their experience and so forth, but we did not see the very low-income families that my intuition told me we should be trying to help, and that we could really make a big difference in their whole lives by giving them a good birth experience. And so we looked for another place to have a birth center in a neighborhood where there were mostly people of color and people of low income. And we finally found a place in the South Bronx in New York, and that was opened in 1988. And it was there that Shawna, I cannot ever adequately emphasize with you the way I did not see the empowerment factor when we went there. I knew that we could make outcomes better. That was never a question in my mind. But this whole idea of empowerment, it was never in my vision at all. And but it was put in my vision by a young African-American woman, because we made a point of telling the families the difference between obstetrics, where it's generally described as doctors delivering babies, and between that and the way we saw it being done, which is we attend women while they give birth. And this young woman, when she was asked what she thought about the care that was given, she said, if you've given birth, then you've given life. And if you've given life, you can do anything. You can get a job, and you can go to school, and you can do whatever you want, as long as you put your mind to it. And she said, I think that's the best thing about the center. It empowers women, and the women in turn empower their families, and the families can empower their community. And Shawna, what I saw when she said all those things, I saw we have the answer to this problem of low-income areas where people get mired in nothing, and that young woman was instrumental in my career.
She helped you to see something that was right there, and you didn't maybe have the words or the vocabulary for it?
Yeah. The way she said it was really a sort of an eye-opener to me. And some years later, when I was at a meeting of medical people, and I was asked to speak about, just give an example, of what we were doing, and I repeated that she said, and you could have heard a pin drop in the place. It was just, and then people came up to me afterward and said, it's really inspirational to hear you say that. I said, okay, let's do more.
I like that. Let's do more. When this young woman is describing the difference in the experience, what at the time when you were first opening these birthing centers, what was the experience for families in a hospital setting in a medical model?
Well, if I can move it from the birth itself to the original visit to a setting for prenatal care, and one of the women described it very well, in that you go in and you're asked what your name is, and you're told to sit down over there, and then you're called over and you're given a card to bring this with you when you come. And you don't know anything about what the care will be, when it will start, what is your role in it, and it's just very denigrating, So it begins that way and it goes on that way, because when women would go in to the hospital labor and delivery suite for birth, first of all, family was not included, so they were going in alone. Secondly, they were given Demerol and scopolamine in most instances, the Demerol to relieve pain and the scopolamine so that they would not remember. But thirdly, they would be tied into the labor bed because they'd had enough Demerol and scopolamine that they were not compos mentis. Mm-hmm. And so they would be tied into the bed because they might throw themselves out of the bed or hurt the fetus or something like that. And they labored that way until they were found to be, sufficiently dilated to go to the delivery room. And when they got to the delivery room, again, on the table, they would be strapped on with great leather cuffs that they could not possibly have gotten out of. And the whole idea was that we don't want them to get off the table to hurt themselves, and so forth. I remember going down to the labor and delivery room with a woman who had had a prior birth experience. And when she got down there, it was too late for her to have the additional general anesthesia, which was usually given in the delivery room on top of what else had happened earlier in the labor. But when she got down there, she was ready to give birth. So they caught the baby, and she pushed herself up as much as she could on the table, and she said, "I want to hold my baby." And she was told, "You can't hold your baby. You're dirty, and your baby is clean."
Say that again? She was told, "You're dirty?
You're dirty, and your baby is clean." And at the time, the baby would be over, being worked on by the nurses and the pediatricians if necessary. But I really couldn't believe my ears, and yet I was not in a position as really a student nurse. I was that to really make a fuss about that, although I felt like I should be.
So that is so radically different than what our practice and our understanding is right now with mm-hmm. skin to skin, the mm-hmm. warmth of the baby, keeping the baby
right. warm
for thermoregulatory processes, for bonding, for mm-hmm. mother's sense of well-being, there are just so many layers of
benefits.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, benefits. Yes. What we know for mom and baby immediately after that. First of all, that just sounds horrific. No wonder so many women were frightened, reasonably so. Given that treatment model and that medicalization, how were women meant to support the natural contractions in being able to birth their babies if they weren't fully aware and conscious?
Well, they weren't really expected, in my memory, they weren't really expected to be a part of giving birth. They were just to remain there, do as they're told, and we'll take care of it. We'll get your baby out.
You're listening to See You Now. I'm Shawna Butler. We're talking with pioneering nurse, midwife, and MacArthur Fellow, Ruth Lubic. Ruth, I'm curious, how does somebody affect change? How does somebody take a bold idea to the market or to policy or to communities and affect change?
Yeah. You know, Shawna, I would take that all the way back to my precedents. And the one that is most famous probably of all, because I was general director of an organization called Maternity Center Association, which was established in 1917, but its first director was Frances Perkins. And
Frances Perkins, the U.S. Secretary of Labor under FDR. Wow.
You know, it all fits together when you look at it over the long haul. She was just director for a couple of years, but they had been involved in setting up nursing stations in East Harlem and Central Harlem where there was no care available. But I have to say, too, that while nurses did not appear maybe as they should have or be given the credit they should have, we would not have been able to do what we did if we did not have individual doctor friends. And one of the greatest friends we had was Bernard Pisani, who was the chair of the Department of OBGYN at St. Vincent's, and he also later became the president of the New York Academy of Medicine. And when I was called to the New York Academy of Medicine by a group of obstetricians who were operating in the larger teaching hospitals, it was very interesting because we sat in a big conference room and they had said, "We want to talk to you." I said, "I would appreciate that greatly," because we were just getting the freestanding birth center started. So we went round this table, and each one of them told negative stories about what happened if you're not in a hospital and giving birth, So when we got to Barney, as everybody called him, he was a soft-spoken man, a very intense Catholic, really believer in support of families. But his father had been a general practitioner in the Lower East Side, and he and his brothers would go out with him when he was called out to do birth, because the women who lived in those tenements could not get into hospitals. They didn't have money, so he went into their homes and they gave birth there. But Barney had been lucky enough to have the experience of see how important this was socially and to the families and so forth. And he said to this group, and mind you, he was the president of the New York Academy of Medicine at the time, and this was in the mid-'70s, And when it came to his turn to speak, and he was the last to speak, he told them about his father and how he had helped his father going into tenements and helping women give birth in tenements. And he said, "I think they deserve a chance." And so the whole thing turned over in my direction, where it had not been in my direction for quite a bit of time in the beginning of that conversation. So I just wanted to make the point that while organized medicine may have a great number of doubts about what nurses can do, there are individual physicians there who in the world who help you, and I can name a number who were important people in my career, and Barney he was one of them, but there were others too. So it's an interesting problem, if you will, but I think it proves the fact that we all need to work together.
You make a very important distinction between organized medicine, organized healthcare, and individual practitioners and professionals. And you have many examples of where collaboration and partnership has been fundamental and vital and critical to making progress. And most of the innovators, regardless of their training or preparation or the role that they hold, those who have been successful speak very much to that need in order to move an idea or a new way of doing into impact. It does happen by having key partners.
Shawna, when you get MacArthur, there are a lot of doors that open for you. And one of the doors that had opened for me in 1993 was an invitation to travel with a professional group, mostly pediatricians, to France to look at what the French call their system, protection maternelle et infantile, not aid to and assistance for, but protection of mothers and babies. And I had really been affected by that. You know, I saw all the things that the French did. They had peripatrices who went out and did visits after the birth of the child and so forth. And all I could think of, really, to tell you the truth, is the problems that my husband, who is sitting here with me, and I had raising our son by ourselves, so to speak. We had a wonderful obstetrician who gave us an hour of time to spend with him when he was born in hospital, and but the whole movement toward families staying together and being together, I saw a lot of in my trip to France, and I actually became friendly with some of the French American Foundation people, and they were really interested in what we were doing too.
So you mentioned receiving the MacArthur Fellowship. What change did that make for you, and what circles of influence and ideas and expectations and opportunities did that award open up for you?
Well, I guess what it did primarily was open up my eyes to the fact that people thought that what the nurse midwives in the country were doing had a certain benefit that needed to be rewarded. Now, the thing about the MacArthur is that you cannot apply for it, and it just happens to you or it doesn't. And it did happen to me. Now, it was a real, what can I say, blessing, I guess, is the best word for me. And it made me feel that there was a road down which I should continue going, and that there might be for the families that we serve, there might be a reward. Now, what it did for me was make me want to work with the country's worst outcomes, which you know, Shawna, are here in the district, and so Bill was very open to us moving down, or at least my coming down here, to see what there was that I might be able to do. And it did take, I got the MacArthur in 93, and then I started coming down on a regular basis in 94, and finally decided I better rent an apartment and so forth, and he was very collaborative with that idea. And so that enabled me to work to find a place to put a birth center. But having the funding, which I think in those days it was $375,000 that you were given as a MacArthur awardee, and then to have that funding enabled me to do that, and things went along, you know.
I can't help but notice many of the similarities between your work and your life and your career and that of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Oh, yes.
There's so many interesting parallels, and I've only been able to find one picture with the two of you together. Mm-hmm. I'm curious in your career and your pathways, because they do have very similar paths. And this point when you were making, that when we show women of your generation the nursing, that history, I don't think we can. I think it's the elephant in the room when we don't talk about what it was like for women to be in the professions in the 50s and 60s. There were limitations, and I think the two Ruths here have done a great deal to change that.
Well, you know, you're aware, are you, Shawna, that I gave Ruth Bader Ginsburg lessons in participatory childbirth. Her first child was a girl person named Jane, and she did not like the experience that she'd had. And she's actually been quoted in the Washington Post Sunday magazine section when they did an article on us. And then, but Marty was, he was a fellow young lawyer with Bill at a very important New York firm. So they knew each other very well, and in the summertime there would be parties for the associates, which is what Bill and Marty Ginsburg were. They were associates in the firm. And so I met Ruth there. And Ruth and I would sit in a corner and talk about the real world. And we remained good friends after that time. When she was asked by the interviewer from the Post, about what she thought about her experience having had the participatory childbirth methodology taught her. Now, I was not her midwife, but except in the preparation that a midwife would do. But when she had the baby, she responded that she felt triumphant after giving birth to James, the second child. And we have remained friends since then. And she writes me often and tells me what a good girl I've been doing so much for families. And, another person on the court who was very close to me was Sonia Sotomayor, because Sonia was actually on the board of Maternity Center Association for a 3-year period. And I got in touch with her and invited her to come out and see what we were doing. And she's a marvelous human being. We haven't discussed as yet, I don't know when we might do that, but we haven't discussed as yet my introduction into the model of freestanding birth centers, the whole utilization of the geography, I guess, of the center to include early childhood development, right? And we do that at the 4th week of life. The children can be enrolled in the early childhood development. And one of the things that, or I suppose the thing that I am most interested in now is in redefining the word perinatal. The word perinatal should be begun with the conception and go through the period, not stopping for the birth period, but just go straight on through to the point where we know that the child's mental capacities are continuing to grow. And that's what we've tried to do at the Developing Families Center.
That's a really important distinction to be made, particularly in the face of something that you've been working on for decades. But that is the rate of maternal and infant mortality, which is shockingly and unconscionably high in the U.S. and rising. As we think about nurses being involved with social justice and an advocate and an activist, which you have been such a pioneering example, where do you think and maybe you didn't think of it as social activism or social advocacy, where do you credit some of those seeds of looking at inequities and disparities and knowing and feeling that you had a perspective and a point of view that was really important to be heard and shared?
Shawna, I haven't mentioned it. I don't often mention it, but my mother's older sister was a graduate also of the University of Pennsylvania Hospital School of Nursing. And I didn't know a lot about what she had done as a student nurse, but when I talked about going into nursing myself, I talked to her, about what was going on. She told me why she went into nursing, was completed the course, and then left nursing. She graduated in 1914. During that period of time, the nurses were assigned to particular settings. She was assigned to the operating room. and she just hated what she saw. She felt that there must be better ways to give people back control over their bodies than the way it was being managed, or what she saw there. Did she
mention what she saw that was so distressing?
Well, it is just that there was no opportunity for the person who was having the surgery, to participate in decision-making and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But there was a woman whose name I don't remember right now, Frances something. Anyway, she was very involved in trying to help people use their bodies better. And my Aunt Alice saw what she was doing, and then at her suggestion, went to New York to study with Isadora Duncan, dance
and,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and control of body, and so forth. So she did that. When the war was over, she left nursing, and she went back and studied more fully with Isadora Duncan. And then she went back to Philadelphia, and she set up a program called the Alice Craft School of Rhythm. And she taught the rhythm qualities of dance to people who were having trouble with, maintaining their balance, using their bodies well. And this is for it. There were a lot of children that were she studied with, but there also were many adults. And she went on and worked at that for the rest of her life. But there are still organizations that promote the theory of Isadora Duncan. Mm-hmm. And it's not, it's about dance, but it's not just dance to entertain. It's dance to improve your body function, and to help you to enjoy your life and use your body well. And so it really was a kind of, what would you call that today, Shawna?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I hear that phrase, I've left nursing, and I don't think nurses ever leave. I think they take their discipline and their expertise and their insights with them into new domains and to new areas. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so they bring that clinical understanding, the physiologic, the psychologic, and the practical to a different area. And dance is that perfect example when we think about people who have movement disorders. Mm-hmm. And I think in the period of time when your aunt was practicing, how many people had suffered from polio or who had been in the iron lung? And so, we needed to help people regain muscular strength, movement, stability. And I see that right now in so many different therapies where nurses are bringing mindfulness, meditation, music, movement, a range of disciplines into helping children with autism, adults who have Parkinson's. How do we increase the stability so that people can have independent lives, that they have greater mobility, greater autonomy, and a certain degree of dignity? When people don't feel that they can manage their own needs, if they can't reach for a glass of water, if they're not able to move from a chair to standing, they tend to isolate themselves. And so every bit of autonomy we give people allows them to stay much more connected to their communities and to what gives them joy every day.
And so, it's rehabilitation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's restoration. Yes. Sometimes it's optimization. Sometimes it's recovery. But when I hear things, when people say, I left nursing, I'm like, no, you didn't. You've just taken it with you to a new application in another domain.
Yes.
When you look out the near term and even 20 years out and think about health innovators and the challenges that they're solving, the things that they see right in front of them that they care to put their time and energy around, what are some of the great opportunities that you think health innovators should focus their energy and attention on?
Well, I would have to probably come back to the whole idea of the early childhood development, and as much as possible to keep it on a group basis. And I think that a lot can be done in that fashion. We're working very hard with the Frontier Nursing Service. No, it used to be Frontier Nursing Service. Is now the Frontier Nursing University, which is producing many educated nurse midwives, nurse pediatricians. It's all these kinds of
a lot of the primary
people
care
who are needed for families, and they of course have had years of experience in Kentucky, and they know the people well. So we're hoping that we can do a breakthrough into the care of people who are in rural areas, and make that a real breakthrough too.
I think there are many opportunities in rural care, and the more we are comfortable and capable with using video communications and remote learning, remote care, virtual care, we're seeing a great opportunity to improve and level the standards of care between our inner city, our suburban, and our rural areas. It's wonderful to see that we can use a technology that really democratizes the outcomes and the access.
I think you're right, Shawna. I really do.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot in telepsychiatry. At some point, we'll remove the it will just be psychiatry, and we don't think about telebanking anymore or teletravel agency. So it is interesting to see how nurses are embracing a range of technologies to solve the circumstances and address the needs of people wherever they are, whether it's where they live, work, pray, and play. And with your model and emphasis and focus on trusting people and trusting communities and having them teach us how to care for them, I think we're in a really good place, Ruth.
Well, I do too, and I think that there are many schools of nursing that are very open to any way they can make the outcomes in this country better. The whole idea of the professions working together, to me, seems to be taking hold, and I think it's something that we need. And for example, the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine rewrote its requirements for setting up maternal and infant care a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And whereas it used to be level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 hospitals, it converted to the entry point being accredited freestanding birth centers. And that's another thing that the American Association of Birth Centers has done, which is to establish an accreditation program for the birth centers. So it's time that things sort of came together. And I feel that you're talking with me today makes me feel good.
I hope so. I'm curious, do you describe yourself as an innovator?
Well, I'm described that way, I guess. I was really overwhelmed when I saw there's been an article in Nursing Outlook, maybe in 2017, about innovation, especially into social aspects. And so I began to read it. I knew some of the people who had contributed to it, or the Rand Corporation, I think, had started it, but there were others in there, like Diana Mason, whom I have known for years and who's always been supportive of us, and some of the nursing staff at Penn, Tony Villaruel, and but anyway, it went into the fact that nurses have long had an interest in improving the social world too, and it started out by talking about the first one being Florence Nightingale. And I thought, well, that's for sure. And then it talked about, let's see, who the second one was.
I think it was Lillian Wall.
Oh, I know, Lillian Wall.
Yeah, Lillian Wall.
Who set up the visiting nurse service. And then the third person it mentioned was somebody named Ruth Lubic. Well, I guess I better listen. It's a great compliment, I think. I'm just really delighted that it was said. I'm not sure I deserve that, but anyway, it makes me feel good and makes my husband feel good too.
I appreciate that. And I am so grateful for this conversation.
Thank you, Shawna.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Bill.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bill.
Ruth most certainly is deserving of the innovator status and the title of living legend that was granted to her in 2001 by the American Academy of Nursing. Ruth Lubic is a nurse, midwife, and applied anthropologist whose work in the field of community-centered birthing has spanned over 6 decades. At 93, Ruth continues to advocate for marginalized and low-income families. She and her husband, Bill, joined us from the NPR studios in Washington, D.C. What struck me about our conversation was how timely Ruth's message and work remain. She mentioned having started a movement that even she couldn't stop if she wanted to. And that is so true. Initiatives like Common Sense Childbirth, Baby Live Advice, the Black Mamas Matter Alliance, and the National Birth Equity Collaborative are all innovating to change the shocking statistical tide of maternal mortality and morbidity in the U.S. The idea that it takes a village to raise a child, it can't be a throwaway line. Ruth reminds us that innovating for safety, for dignity, empowerment, joy, and community must be at the forefront when it comes to how we understand, imagine, and develop healthcare for women, mothers, and babies, and that nurses need to be in those conversations every step and every breath of the way. For See You Now, I'm Shawna Butler. Thank you for listening.
See You Now is created in collaboration with Johnson & Johnson and the American Nurses Association. Johnson & Johnson is proud to power up nurse-led innovation that is transforming health outcomes through skill building, leadership development, and more. The American Nurses Association ignites and celebrates nurse-led innovation to redefine quality nursing and advance healthcare for all. To learn more about these programs and See You Now, visit seeyounowpodcast.com. Check out our show notes for more resources, and be sure to subscribe to See You Now wherever you get podcasts.